Hunting is not easy. It never has been. It takes dedication, motivation, a lot of patience, and quality gear. If you manage a food plot, put up stands, or need just one more game camera, we can help at MidwayUSA.com. We opened our doors in 1977 and continue to put customers first by offering super fast, same-day shipping. For just about everything for the outdoors, go to MidwayUSA.com. Midway USA brand product designers have one straightforward goal: develop high-quality, technically sound products and deliver them to customers at reasonable prices. If you are immersed in the shooting sports industry and pay close attention to every single detail, you know our products are built right and stand up to everyday use. Who has shooting mats and range bag systems to hunting clothing and just about everything for the outdoors? Log on and shop 24/7 with super fast shipping. MidwayUSA.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And you can check us out at the Great American Outdoors Show this weekend. We're going to be there hanging out in the Latitude booth, myself, along with my good buddy Greg Litzinger. So if you're over there, stop by, say hi. We're going to be in the archery hall this year, a little different spot than we've been in the last couple of years. But yeah, really looking forward to that. That's always a fun time, catching up with D-Rock and some of the Latitude boys. So we'll be doing that this weekend. This podcast is a really fun one. Jake Downs. So Jake has I guess somewhat of a sordid past with the industry. You can check out his podcast, Earn Your Hunt podcast. Definitely not safe for work and not safe for the kiddos in the car. But a real straight shooter with some big opinions on the industry and things like that. But he also hunts just about everything, and he is chasing the North American 29 with his Recurve, and he also hunts with a compound. He hunts with a shotgun. He predator hunts. I mean, he just likes to kill stuff, and it's pretty awesome. Fun guy to follow along with, both from talking to him like on a personal level, as well as just seeing like his next hunt. I think he said is in April for muskox, for the one of the big ones. He's killed 19 so far, I believe, and we talk about like how do you even start that, some of the adventure hunts that he's gone on and what he would recommend, for guys who want to try something different, but specifically with some high target opportunities. So yeah, just a really fun, interesting, super interesting podcast. Great dude to talk to. Really enjoyed it. So I know you guys are going to like this one. As always, thanks for listening. All right, everybody, Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And no pre-workup on this one. I've talked to Jake a little bit on the phone and back and forth through text and Instagram memes and things like that. And with his style, I think it's best to just jump right into it. Jake Downs, I'd like to introduce him as the anti-fluencer, kind of from that. He's got a podcast you may or may not have heard. He claims he has 17 listeners. Maybe that's a little high, or maybe underselling that a little bit. Earn Your Hunt podcast, and we'll jump right into it. How are you doing today, Jake?
Good, man. How you doing?
Not too bad. Jake has roped me into this 75 hard thing. I haven't really been telling many people about it because I'm going to fail. I have a vacation coming up that if you've been around me, I'm definitely going to drink. So that's the problem. But like, it's like what, day 18 today, Jake?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. I don't know. I have to look at my photos to know, but
so that's the thing for me, is it's like get up early, I don't work out very like regularly or hard or anything like that. So just the getting up early and doing 2 a day is just, I feel like it's wearing on me at this point.
Yeah, dude, I don't know. It's like the first time I did it, I almost prepared for it for like a couple years. Like I was always thought like I'm gonna do that. So I started kind of making it a habit to do the harder parts of it, which in my mind are the 2 workouts a day and the drinking water. That much water is I don't know. It's like breaking the seal when you're drinking. I'm not a big drinker, but back in the day, you'd have to pee every 20 fucking minutes. Well, that's how I feel all day long now. But it's really not that hard once you start doing it. Like I don't know. It depends on what time, how much time you have too. Because it's something that it's how I live when I'm at home, but I'm never at home. Like it's pretty rare for me to even get 75 days in a row where I'm not traveling or doing something. And that you can toss that shit right out the window when I'm doing that. It's too complicated to eat healthy, get 2 workouts in, but how's it going for you, man?
Not too bad. I feel the same way. Like I had been thinking about it for like years, and for me, it's like the opposite. Like I can kind of eat healthy. Like I can make those choices. The water thing, I've been doing that since I heard about like the 25 hour, and I picked the worst damn book. Like it's like the size of like a kid's book, and the font is like 8 font, so it's like 7,000 words a page, so it takes me like a half hour to read. Like I should have picked like a picture book or something. That's
there's a lot of like intricacies once you get into it, that like when I first did it, my wife got really into like looking it up. Like I didn't really look it up, I just looked at like the bullet points, like 2 workouts a day, 45 minutes each. One's got to be outside. I was like, well, that's easy. Drink 128 ounces or a gallon of water a day, read 10 pages, and take a photo every day. Don't drink alcohol. That's one of them. I don't even put that on my fucking list because that doesn't factor in for me anyway, because I don't drink. I mean, it's whatever. But so I was looking at that. Well, she went through and got like all the specifics. Like it has to be like the workouts have to be like 3 hours apart or they don't count. And the water has to be pure water. It can't have anything in it. And like all these and like the book has to be, I knew it had to be nonfiction, but you can't, once you start reading it, you can't fucking quit. So all these things, like my wife, the first book she read the Paul Saladino carnivore book. And she's like, I don't even, half the words in this are so scientific. I can't even fucking understand it. This is miserable. I've been lucky on the reading part, but yeah, I mean, the idea of it, I was telling my wife this morning, I was like, if I missed a picture, like the first time I did it, I was very strict. I was like, if I failed, then I failed. But this time, if I accidentally forgot to take my picture one day, I wouldn't just quit. I would just keep going. Like, who gives a fuck? Like the idea of it is very good, and it kind of teaches. Like I've learned a lot on diet. Like honestly, the hardest part for me is not necessarily this time, but last time was the diet. Like it's just depending on how much you restrict yourself. But everybody struggles with different parts of it. I mean, I guess if you were coming into it and you maybe you only work out, 4 days a week, which is pretty old. That's really good. I'm not saying that's bad. You work out 4 or 5 days a week for half hour, 45 minutes. That's like normal humans. And you jumped into working out twice a day, every day, no rest. Like that would be a big jump. I kind of made it a deal where when I'm at home, I work out every day. And I started, I used to think lifting was stupid. Now I started doing that. So I would run or ruck in the, early, and then I would lift in the evening, afternoon time. So I started doing that anyway. So my body was kind of used to it. I didn't do it every day, but most days. So I think it's a good challenge, but I also think it's ridiculously stupid. Like you know what I mean? Like I think it teaches you some stuff, but also like my wife tells me sometimes, like she's on all these forums, not forums, but like Facebook pages that have to do with it, and people are like, "Oh, I've got the flu and I'm throwing up, and it's below zero, and it's day 4. Should I give up and start when I?" And people are like, "Don't give up, you pussy." And I'm like, man, if I'm 4 days in, fuck it. You know what I mean? Like I did get sick last time, and I did continue through, but I don't know. I guess you'll have to see how you feel about it when you get done. Because when I got done last time, I found myself overanalyzing certain things that I did during it that weren't failures, but I was like, well, I probably didn't even complete it because, it wasn't, this day I had, whatever, I ate fucking something that might have had a little bit of processed sugar in it, and I probably fucking failed. So I don't know. I think it's a good thing, but also it's just the most ridiculously stupid thing you can do.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page. Like I've technically failed. I did, and I kind of went in and read the rules, so I think this is like a gray area. But to your point, like who cares? I did. It was like an absolute complete blizzard, and I had to do an outdoor workout, and like I had a legitimate fear of getting killed by a snowplow. Like that was like a very real possibility would be getting hit by a snowplow. And so I was like, well, I'll just do 2 workouts inside because, and again, to your point, who cares? Like I went into this knowing that there was going to be like hardships, and it kind of goes into like how this podcast is going to go, where it's like the influencer thing. Like, oh, look at me, look at what I'm doing. Like, look at this. Like, oh, look at how much water I've drank today. Like, look at my, and so I exactly feel what you're saying, but like one of the things is like, if it's unsafe, like you don't have to do it. But then if I were to be in one of those groups or forums, they'd have been like, well, you could have just walked up and down your driveway for 45 minutes. Like, get the fuck out of here.
It is whenever you make it. I think the other thing is that I've never read the guy's book, and I've never really dove into it. But like he really doesn't lay out that much. Like there's no specific diet. You pick a diet. But then he's like, if you eat a fucking cookie, you're out. And I'm like, well, there's actually diets out there where you can eat fucking cookies, dude. Like what do you? So like this go around, like I'm not eating cookies and shit, but I honestly, this go around, my main goal is to build some muscle. I've always been a fatty. My whole life, I've had fat. I've been a fatty. So like I have this midsection. And now that I've been lifting and doing abs pretty much every single day and shit, like I have like the start of abs on top and then just this rolly fucking skin. So I'm trying to like work through some of that shit. And to do that, I'm just tracking my macros. And I'm eating 80 to 90% whole foods. But if I want to go out to eat and have, we went to Qdoba the other day. I had a burrito bowl, and I fucking tracked it. Like for me, I just gotta okay it. Like if we go to a birthday party and there's cake there, I'm gonna skip it. But when this shit is over, I'm gonna try to continue what I'm doing. But that 20%, I think, to me, and everybody says this, the 80-20 diet is like the ultimate. And I never have gotten myself to be able to do it. And it's the whole thing about like the world is designed to make you fat. And it is. Like our world is, if you are out and about and you're eating at home and you're making your meals and you're eating and you enjoy it, but other than the fucking cleanup afterwards, which sucks, you know, your nonstop dishes, nonstop going to Walmart. But if you're doing that and then you go out to eat and you track that, you're like, Jesus, look at the carbs in this. Look at the, like, I don't even have any macros left after one outing. So if you're very, if you're not, it's just eye opening is what it is, to the world that we live in. But I also think that these people are ridiculous. They are, you know, I only eat this, you know, lean meat and a fucking stick of butter. You know, like, I know, like, I've wanted to try carnivore forever. And I tried it for about a week and I felt like garbage. And they're like, well, you just got to get through the first 3 weeks, then you feel better. And I'm like, no, because there's absolutely no possible way that I'm going to sustain this. Yes, I could do it for 75 days straight. I'd be a miserable cunt. My wife would hate me. My kids would hate me. But I could do it. But why? Because after I get done with that, I'm going to binge on something. I'm going to feel like garbage. And then it's just going to be all over. So I think the 80-20 thing is the way I'm going to try to live my life. And this tracking, it does help. Like, when you track, I don't know what you're doing, but if you track what you're eating and watch your macros and kind of watch what you're putting in your body, you start learning things. And then when you do kind of quit, yes, I still fall off a wagon like I did last year in New Zealand. I ate 8,000 fucking calories a day at least. But you know that you're doing that. You know what I mean? You're like, oh man, I bet that, I know what that has in it, you know? So, I don't know. What have you found to be the hardest part?
I don't know. I like, for me, like, cause I've people who listen to this podcast and they'll be like, he doesn't work at all. Like, he works 0 days. But when I do work, like the days I work 10 to 12-hour days. So like, and then plus travel and everything like that. So it's like my whole day is taken up. So the days that I work, like, I get home, it's dark, and it's like I get home, eat dinner maybe, and then strap on my pack and walk around like, we have a lake across the street from the house. It's 2.5 miles. It takes me about 45 minutes with a weighted pack on. And doing those two things, and like all like the drinking thing, like, I could literally stop drinking like right now. And everybody says, oh yeah, every alcoholic says that or whatever. But I want to drink 0 beers or 9,000 beers. Like, I don't want to like there is no like middle ground. I don't want to like have 3 beers and be sleepy. Like, I feel like it's just like, and like the same thing is like being around like drunk people, like when you're like not drinking, is like, oh, hate it. And like my thing about that is like, I would drink soda like it's going out of style. And if I sat with you and drank 12 beers, you'd be like, oh, hell of a night. But if I drank 12 Mountain Dews, you'd be like, oh my God, that guy's a pig. Like, I have that like dichotomy like in my brain, like those things. But I would drink like 1,000 beers or 0. Like, so
Yeah.
And just going out and like being in like those environments is like that's where like now I'm the weirdo, you know?
Yeah. Luckily, I don't have that social aspect of my life. You know, I've never, like, I did that shit when I was in college, you know, and I partied and did plenty of crazy, stupid shit. But once I got married, like, I never was that interested in that stuff. And so it's not something that I deal with. But I'm the same way. Like, I'm 110%. Like, my brothers, you know, they'll come home after a hard day and have a beer or two, and you know, they enjoy it. I fucking hate. Like, if I'm gonna drink, I'm getting drunk. Like, I'm gonna drink whiskey, and I'm gonna drink fuck, 3 whiskeys right now, and I'd be a slobbering mess. But I can see that, you know, I'm similar to what you're saying. Like, if I'm all in, I'm all in. Like, if I'm all in on fitness, that's what I'm all in on. I'm doing it. If I'm all in, I mean, I'm a psychopath when it comes to hunting. Like, it's all I do. It's all I think about. It's all, you know, it's the only reason I work, you know, whatever. So yeah, I get it. It's yeah, I don't know, man. And what you're saying, like, the getting home, that's a tough one. And I'm lucky because my job is now fairly, like, I'm still very active, still very, I every day I have things I need, but I can sneak workouts in it depending on what the day it looks like. I can sneak them in the afternoon. The one thing I hate more than anything is a really fucking busy day, just like what you just said, and having to do this shit at after you put the kids to bed, because it's just, that's why I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because I'm like, I'm gonna knock that shit out before I go do anything else. I'm gonna make the morning as brutal as possible. I'm gonna do all the worst things, and then if I had to come home and go in my nice warm house and lift, even if it's legs, I can do that. I can make myself do that easier than I can going outside. So I'm with you there, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good challenge to try, but like you said, my wife doesn't even like talking. She doesn't like tell people we're doing it. I'm a douche. Like, I, it's not for me. Like, the Instagram thing is not necessarily, like, I'm not trying to become a professional hunter. I don't want that. Like, at one point in my life, maybe, but it has, what I've got going has opened doors for me. I've gotten a ton of people that have, it's weird. Like, I don't have a giant following, and the podcast doesn't have a giant following, but the people that I do have that follow me are pretty legit dudes. They're hardworking family men, good hunters. Just I can't speak. I'm not saying they're all good hunters. So I'm just, whatever. They're just good, like, normal people like me, like a normal guy that has a normal job, works hard so he can hunt hard. And they fucking, for whatever reason, really like the podcast. And I've had people message me and say how much they like it. And I've had fucking people tell me some crazy shit. Like, I had one guy just recently tell me that I don't remember if it was my content on social media, like what I'm doing every day with the kids and whatever. I think that's what it was. Or maybe it's a podcast, or a little bit of both. He said he had cancer, and it was helping him lighten, like, it made him feel good. Like, it was a bright point in his day of having cancer. I'm like, holy shit. And I'm not saying that to brag. What I'm saying is that's why I continue, because it does me no good. Like, I don't, other than the feel goods, I don't make money off of it. Don't plan to. I don't. I guess what it has benefited me in is hunting opportunity. I've met a lot of cool people, guides, outfitters. I've gotten tips on places to hunt. It does do something that way, but I think a lot of guys are trying to build this following up so they can make money, so they can monetize hunting, and that's not my goal at all. 1,000% not my goal. No clue how I got on that rant. Don't even remember what the fucking question was, but anyway, that's kind of how I look at social media and these challenges. I'm not trying to show people. I'm not trying to show off that I'm doing 75 hard. 75 hard helps me stay vigilant and stay just on track. It gives me a goal to set, and with sharing it, I'm just sharing my day. If I was eating fucking nothing but donuts every day, I've shared that. Like, I always, whatever I'm doing, I feel like it. I've had people tell me, like, hey man, just, I saw you were eating donuts the other day. I felt better about myself because I eat donuts, and some of these fucking influencers, they're out there taking steroids and 90% of what they fucking post is fake. And I'm not saying I don't, you can't post everything. Like, I'm not saying, I mean, there's certain things that you gotta police. Like, there's certain aspects of hunting that you gotta somewhat police. That's a tricky situation. That's a tricky conversation. But in all, 95% of my, I just post what I'm doing, so that if I'm being a jackass and fucking stuff up, then you see that. If I'm doing 75 hard and working out and going hard, you see that as well. So I just feel like it just shows people like, hey, like, you don't have to fucking be something. You don't have to be an influencer to go hunting all the time. Like, you can be like this jackass, So I guess that's where I'm at with it.
So kind of from that perspective, like, how did you get to this point? Like, how do you come from like a family of hunters that does like all this crazy stuff, or like how, cause you've come up through like somewhat of the influencer ranks, type stuff to get to now, have what you have a little bit. So like for people who are just saying like, who's this guy and why is he on here talking about 75 hard? Jake is, like he said, he's a hunting psychopath. How I got introduced to him was a couple of ways. One, I was at the Kalamazoo Trad Expo a few years ago, and he was there just kind of hands in his pockets, kicking rocks around. And one of the speakers was mentioning him, and they kept saying like Jake and how he was the shooter and blah, blah, blah. So you kind of like put two and two together, like, oh, that's this guy. And then I did a podcast. I didn't have a podcast, so a guest or anything. So I did like a solo podcast, which most of Jake's are solo, kind of what we've heard today, kind of a little here and there, but they got a message. And I called it Earn Your Hunt, because it was like everybody wants to buy stuff. Everybody wants to just buy gear, at least in the whitetail world, to make them a better hunter. I need this piece of gear to make me better. And so I'd had some conversations with some of the Patreons, and it was like, well, why don't we do it like this and kind of put like a goal on there? And like, if you meet your hunting goal for this year, then you buy like whatever. And then maybe you'll even realize that you don't need that piece of gear. And I get this kind of snarky comment from this Earn Your Hunt podcast, like, original name. And now it's like, shit. Like, and then, so I just ended up kind of like following along, never listened to the podcast once. Just kind of followed along, and this guy's killing everything under the sun, and he's got a stick bow. Sometimes he's got a compound. Sometimes he's got a shotgun. I'm like, just kind of really intrigued. So I'm like, I got to talk to this guy, and like never reached out to him or anything like that. And, then it was a month or so ago, he was hunting and he was doing one of these, like, ask me a question. And I was like, hey, when are you going to come on the podcast and talk about, what you're doing? And he's like, I don't know if you want it. I don't know what you got. We want what I got to give, but I'm game. So here we are. Kind of a quick synopsis there, but like, so for you starting out, like, what was your like hunting upbringing to like get you to this hunting psychopath, as you'd put it?
Well, I grew up hunting. My dad was a big hunter, but he wasn't like me. Like, he hunted a lot, but back in those days, he looked at and still looks at hunting differently than I do. He looks at it as kind of that old school, like, you hunt to, and I don't even know if this was his theory back in those days, because he hunted a lot. He shot a lot of different animals, but back when public land wasn't overrun, you could still get tags. We went to the mountains elk hunting every year. When we were too young to go, we would go scouting in the summer for my dad's hunts. Like, I have a picture. My dad has a picture of me at like 8 months old on his trap line. He was a big trapper when I was young. Back when coyotes were actually worth something. So I grew up hunting, fishing, trapping. But also, like, my dad didn't go to Africa. He didn't go to New Zealand. He didn't go, I think he would have loved to go to Alaska back when he was young. Now he just thinks spending money on hunting is ridiculous, stupid. It's, and he's kind of burnt by this new era that we live in where hunting costs money. Like, it's getting harder and harder to get access. And I get it. Like, I'm the same way. Like, I would love to go back to the days where, trailheads weren't 80 vehicles and, every single freaking rancher had an outfitter on it or a lease on it. But also, you kind of have to adapt to the new, the world changes. You either become an old codger and just bitch about it, or you fucking change with it. And yes, you can still hunt public land. I still do a lot. That's one good thing about the way I do things. I get to experience everything from the hardest DIY, public land, over the counter, garbage, whatever hunt. I almost said garbage hunt. That's not what I meant. But hard to going to Africa and shooting stuff over a water hole, in a giant high fence. Like, I've done the spectrum. And there's challenges in all of it. And I would love to go back to those days, but things have changed. So you've got to kind of change with it. And I guess a long time ago, how I got here is I became obsessed with hunting when I was a kid. And then I kind of lost some track of it because my dad kind of lost a little bit of interest in it. He bought a little hobby farm. He kind of started doing that. He kind of, the like I said, the world of hunting kind of was changing at the time. It was harder to get access. We had great ground hunt when I was a kid, and we were losing all of it because, so-and-so is going to pay me to hunt. And I think that's really what just pushed my dad into this place where he's like, fuck it, I'm not doing it. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm not. So I kind of lost track of it a little bit. We still hunted and trapped, but it wasn't like through high school and stuff. It wasn't like an obsession. And my mom bought me, when I was a young kid, she bought me a Fred Eichler video at like I don't even know. It was like a secondhand store or maybe a garage sale or something. She bought me this video, and I'm not shitting you. I wore it out. And I just remember being a young kid and going, this guy, he's seriously like, he's this week he's hunting caribou, and then next week he's hunting antelope, and then he's elk hunting, and now he's moose hunting, and then he's in Africa. I'm like, holy shit, this is just 1 year of this guy's life. And I just remember thinking like, oh, hunting could be something else. Like, hunting is, it doesn't have to be, one thing or another. Like, it actually kind of taught me like, hey, there's another way you can do this. And I kind of held on to that. Fred's always been, since then, he's been my hero. Probably why, I shot a recurve bow back then. I shot my first deer with a compound, but it was with no sights, instinctive. That's how my dad shot a bow. So that's how I shot my first few animals. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm going to be Fred. Like, I'm going to hunt with a stick bow, and I'm going to be Fred. Before I knew who Fred Eichler was, I remember being in the mountains with my dad, and I was like 10 or something, and I was talking about, and I had this fedora that my dad bought. And he goes, and I remember riding the horse and then wearing this little fedora with my little fat face under it, and just being happy as shit. And my dad's like, you look like Fred Bear. And seriously, I didn't know who Fred Bear was. And he told me who he was. So, I'm rambling a little bit, kind of just going through all the aspects that brought me to where I am. It started with my dad. Then Fred Bear was like, oh man. And my dad had an old recurve, so I was shooting that. And I shot, like I said, I moved into a compound with no sights. And then I found the Fred Eichler thing. So I kind of morphed it all together. And as I got older and started hunting more, I started, that's why sometimes I pick up a compound. Sometimes that's why I pick up a rifle or whatever. I think my biggest pet peeve in hunting is the people that think hunting is one thing, and they crucify people that think hunting that hunt a different way. As long as you're hunting legally, I mean, I'm not talking pokers. I'm talking about normal people that enjoy this type of hunting or that type of hunting, or have the money to go hunt private land. Like, as long as they're being honest, as long as you're being honest about what you're doing, not selling, like you're shooting 380 bulls on public land every year, as long as you're being honest about what you're doing and you're having fun and you're doing it ethically, why can't they all be? And I'll be honest with you, I've hunted plenty of hunts that should have been easy, that were fucking brutally hard to get an animal. And I've hunted some public land that should have been really hard, but for whatever reason, I was in the right place, right time, and things just were going off. So I just think people put everything into one category. And if you're not in that category, you're doing it wrong. And that pisses me off more than anything. And in the fact that I get to do all different aspects, I've gotten to see the challenges in every one of them. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it can be one or the other, but.
So one of the questions that I have is, like, from a guy from like that background, where you say your dad, like, basically said, you know what, I'm not paying to go hunt. It was a big part of my life. Now maybe I'll hunt, maybe I won't. How do you become how do you decide that you want to kill all of these different species of animal? Because it's the North American 29 or something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, that probably came from Fred Eichler. I mean, that was his, back when I was watching him, he was just finishing the 29. And I, around the same time, I don't even know if it was around the same time, sometime in my high school years, I found out who Tom Miranda was, and he was chasing 29 or did it or whatever. I guess for me, it's always been, and it still is this is how I put it. I'm at 19 now. It's always been my goal that I don't think I'm going to get. Like, it's legitimately, and I say that with the caveat that I don't think I'm going to get there because, not because of drive, but I think it's just, the 29 has become so, it's such a big deal that rich people have taken it and made it. There's so much demand on some of these species that these outfitters are like taking advantage of. And I don't blame them. I would too. I mean, if demand's high, price is going to be high. So I only say that I don't think I'm going to get there because there are a few obstacles. But I'm also the type that I know that if there's a way for me to spend an inanimate amount of money, and I don't make a lot, I make a decent amount, but I don't own a big company. I have 2 employees. I'm a small electrical company. The only way I've ever made money is by taking projects that people thought I was way too fucking small to do, and then working our asses off, sleeping in a camper, working 16 hours, 7 days a week. So I know myself that if I can go on a hunt and spend more money than I should, which I've done plenty of times, without jeopardizing my family, that's the only thing that matters. Like, if I'm going to do something where, I'm not going to mortgage my home where I could lose my home and the kids could not have a home. But as long as that's taken care of, I'll spend money that most people wouldn't. So I guess it's never out of reach for me, but I don't know by the time I get to Stone Cheap, is it going to double? Like right now, Stone Cheap is 60 to 100,000. That's ridiculous. I bought my house fucking cost me 120. You know what I mean? Like it's gotten so out of control that I don't know what it's going to look like in the future. So I never say, like, no, I'm never going to, I can't do this. I know I can do it, but there might be an obstacle that jeopardizes my family that stops me. So I guess I make it my goal to shoot these animals with the knowledge that it could maybe not happen. So I guess, the drive to do all these different species probably came from Fred Eichler, Tom Miranda, seeing that. Fred Bear. I mean, Fred Bear didn't technically do the 29, but he was all over the place. He shot shit that, like, he shot tigers and stuff, things that people can't even hunt these days. So what I learned is chasing some of these new species. It's not necessarily like, oh, yay, I got another check mark on the box. It's holy shit, I got to see this place or the Arctic, or, I know New Zealand doesn't count for the 29, but I learned that all these new species come with new experiences, crazy travel, crazy places, new customs. Like, if all you want to do is chase elk in the same drainage every year and kill giants because you figured that out, that's great. I think you should do that. If that's what's awesome, if that's what you get drive out of, that's what you get. But if you are kind of adventurous spirit, and it sounds like I'm making sound like those people aren't. What I'm saying is, if you like to see new things, and I didn't even know I was that way until I started doing it. Once I started going to all these new places, man, it was like, wow, like, I can't, these people, like, you go to Newfoundland, you can't even understand a quarter of what they say. And they're speaking English. Like, it's just, the experiences mean more than the animal. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm there to kill an animal, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to check that box. But the experiences are more important. And that sounds super gay, but that's the honest to God truth. Like, getting to see some of these places, I would never get to see. Like, why in the hell would I go to the Arctic? I'm just not that type of guy that's just going to go somewhere just to go there. I have to have a purpose for being here. It gives me that purpose.
So just real quick, are you doing this all with traditional equipment, or is it like a mixed bag? And then, like, back to like the kind of like the beginning of that, like from the outset, from the idea of like, okay, I'm going to try this. Like, at what point did it click for you? Did you say, okay, well, I've seen Tom Miranda and Fred Eichler do these things. I've killed mule deer, whitetail deer. I've killed an elk. What's the next thing? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, where does that, like, where do you make that decision? Like, okay, now this is on my, like, all the hippie bullshit vision board, or like, I got my checklist or whatever.
Yeah. So I'm at 19 with a stick bow, all with the recurve. And to be honest, it started out really young. I was two animals in, I think. Honestly, I'd killed a whitetail deer and I'd killed an antelope. And and maybe it even started before that, because I watched Fred Eichler finish his before I'd even killed anything with a stick bow. I think I'd killed my first deer when I was like 12 or 13, maybe 14 with a compound. Nah, it was probably 14, 15. Regardless, I had, maybe I had the inkling in my head, but it never really clicked until I had those two animals. And I was like, all right. And it wasn't like, I'm going to go after the 29. I heard about the Super 10. Like, that was the thing. Super 10, one of each subspecies. If you don't know what the Super 10 is, I'm sure you do, but maybe your listeners don't. In the 29 species, there's, 5 deer, 4 bears, 4 sheep, and so on and so on. And you just need to kill one of each species. So 1 deer, 1 elk, 1 bear, 1, up to 10. It's up to 10 animals. So I was like, all right, well, that's a reasonable goal. I'm at 2. Next year I'm going elk hunting. Maybe I'll get an elk. I'm going to hunt bears. I'm going to, this, that. So I kind of started chipping away, and then I got to the 10, and I of course had a few others because I had killed mule deer and a few other things. Maybe I can't remember. So I just started chipping away at it, and again, it was like, all right, well, what's the next step after 10? Well, you just keep going. And I've always told people, I said, well, I may not get to the 29, but I'm going to get as many of them as I can. That was always what I tell people, and that's still what I say. I don't know what the future brings, but hell, if I could get to 26, 27, 28, whatever, maybe stone. And what's funny, the stone sheep is probably the one that I want the most. Like I told my wife when I was really young, when I met her, I probably, when I met my wife, I was probably only at 4 or 5 animals. And I said, she always asked me, what's the one you want the most? I said, a stone sheep. And the biggest problem with a stone sheep, like a polar bear is probably similar polar bear's a little cheaper, but the odds of killing a polar bear on that hunt are way higher. You pay 60 to 100,000 for a stone sheep and go with a stick bow. I mean, there's nothing saying you're going to kill that thing. You may not kill it in 2 or 3, 4 trips. So, that is just that little thing. I don't think you should ever have any doubt you can do something, but you also have to have realistic expectations. Like, I'm not going to bankrupt my family again, like I said, to get this goal of that. Really, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, so you end at 27. Who gives a shit? You've accomplished that. So I don't even know if I'll register it. I never registered my super slant or my super 10. I don't know, but
yeah, it's interesting because it's a very like double-edged sword, because from your messaging, right, is that anybody can do this. But it is something that seems, and I'm not just talking, I'm talking, super 10, like whatever, elk hunt, any of this stuff. But it's really interesting because to me, and I would say like to a lot of our listeners, it probably seems like a rich man's game, right? And so like I grew up like, I'm a little bit older than you are, but like my dad, when he was in high school, he went out and elk hunted and mule deer hunted, and they weren't bow hunters. They hunted with rifles, but I mean, rent some horses, go up in and kind of do it. My grandpa's had done just about everything, not any of like the big crazy like stone sheep or anything like that, but he'd been to Africa multiple times. He'd been to Canada hunting caribou and bears and all that stuff. But like, they were business owners and his friends were bankers, and he kind of fell into this group of guys that, they had deep pockets and they went and did all this stuff. And so like like growing up, like I always viewed this kind of stuff. And it's funny because from your, occupation, I never really looked at it as like guys who had built their lives around hunting. Like they worked so that they could hunt. I looked at it as like these guys just worked, they own businesses, they had money, and they went and did these easy hunts for these big, like I remember like when I went and bought the fireplace for my basement, like I went into the place there and I met one of the owners at Total Archery Challenge, but he had all these deer heads and all this stuff. And he's like, oh yeah, those are from Kansas. And I was like, whatever, like not cool. Like, from what you said, like when you say like hunting should be like this thing, like I always think about that sort of stuff as, like the other side of the tracks or whatever, like things that aren't attainable, because, and I don't know why that is. It's just because like, oh, it must be nice, but I'm that guy, right? Like, so we have property in the UP that I don't really hunt, but people would kill for that property. I could go and do some of this stuff. So from your perspective, like from like I hate to use like the words like dollar cost averaging or whatever, like for the hunt, for the adventure, for the the experience, like what for you has been like one of the best like money spent on hunting, understanding that people have different ideas of like what difficult is, right?
Right. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm going to try not to get on a rant that puts us somewhere that didn't have to be what you said. I get asked once a week, you know, what is a one hunt that I should do, on this, or like, I don't even really get specifics. It's like, hey man, what's a good hunt in the West, with a trad bow? And I'm like, I don't, what do you mean? Like, are you talking DIY? You want to, like, I don't even really know what to tell people. And then I get the same question about people like, well, what's an experience that you've had that you think I should have? And I'm like, dude, I have no idea, because only you know that. Like, you know what you like. Um, and I get it. Like, I'm not making fun of those people for asking me. And I don't want people to stop asking me. I try to help. Like, again, that is why I'm staying on social media. I think it's fun to engage with people and try to help them, and actually find out that maybe you did help them. So I don't want people to stop asking me those things, but also it's so different for everybody. And what you just said, dude, 100% still think it. Like, every now and then I'll catch myself like, oh, that son of a bitch is hunting on, oh, it must be nice to hunt San Carlos, like, and I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, if we would focus, it's human nature. That's all it is. Humans are so flawed. We're so jealous. I do it all the time. I just try to internally do it so that I can work through. But, I drive my wife crazy because I tell her and she looks at me like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But I try to internalize those thoughts. But all of those thoughts, I know where they come from. They come from jealousy. They come from not knowing somebody. If you don't know somebody, you immediately think, I think it's human nature to kind of just like try to tear them down. I'm better than them because I do this. And so I guess at the end of the day, what I feel like people should do is really just look at what you want hunting to be. Because I have seriously talked, and it changes. It changes a lot. It changes from year to year for me. There has been years where I'm like, I am fucking done with public land. Like, I get this, I have this, maybe a run of bad luck or a run of just running into person after person after person. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, screw this. So your experiences throughout the year will change what you want to do. And I think your best bet, I think truly what people need to do is just start looking at what they have done and what they enjoyed about what they have done. And then try to apply that to what you're going to do. And also, if you get the opportunity to do something, like if you're out there just looking for something to do, I understand you coming to me and say, hey, what should I go hunt? Well, I have a fucking idea. Let's have a conversation. Maybe a little more context, like, hey man, I enjoy, this kind of hunting, and I want to do this. What would you recommend between these few animals? I can help you there. That I can do. If you just say, hey, I've shot 3 white-tailed does, what should I shoot next? I'd say a buck. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I wouldn't go waste your money. So for me to say, this experience or that experience, like, you could literally sit me down in front of a book of of what I've done, and you could flip to a page and I'd be like, oh my God. And I'd start telling you about, why this hunt was so fucking awesome. And then you flip to a page back here and it would be, this hunt is a public land DIY fucking backpack, brutal trip where we killed a giant bull. It was, I'd go nuts on that. And then you switch back and I shot this kudu while I was eating some fucking hay they threw out. And I would be explaining to you why that was hard and what that animal was so fucking switched on, and my heart was pounding and I couldn't get my shit together. And I mean, there's different challenges and everything, and there's different experiences. And like Africa, yes, it's expensive. You spend a lot of money, but each animal, if you said, well, I'm gonna shoot a kudu, I think I paid $1,800 to shoot my kudu. Fuck, I've paid more than that for just to get access on a place to hunt mule deer. Like, just no guiding, no food, no nothing. So experience is everything. I think that is the biggest advice I could give somebody, is go and experience anything that you can. When you're thinking about what you want to do next, don't overshoot the moon. Like I said, if you hunted and shot 3 whitetail does, don't go on a sheep hunt. I mean, I can't say that for sure. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. Like, everybody can do whatever the fuck they want, but I'm just saying, pick your battles. Work your way up. I don't know. Like I said, it's so hard for me to just nail something down. But I would say the experience, the more you go to do whatever kind of hunting it is, rabbit hunting all the way up to bear hunting, sheep hunting, whatever, the more you can just make yourself go. And then I would never look at something like you were just saying. Like, in my opinion, I think it's a mistake to have an opportunity to do something and just say, no, I'm not doing that, because unless you've experienced it. Now, if you've gone and you've experienced it and that's not what you enjoy, then don't do it. Like you were saying, that place you could hunt, but it doesn't give you the same satisfaction. That makes sense. Don't fucking do it. But so I'm not specifically talking about you, but I'm talking about someone that's got an opportunity. Like, I've heard a million people say, I don't need to go to Africa. Why would I need to go to Africa? Stupid. I used to say that. I said it a lot. Now I've been to Africa, I want to go back to Africa, So I just think experience as much as you can, take every opportunity you can, and then the more you experience, the more you'll know what you want to experience, the more you'll know how to pick these opportunities that you want to do that kind of fall into line with that.
Well, let's rephrase the question just a little bit to say about, if your goal is to, and I know that the answer is going to vary depending on the hunt, the day, the everything, but like success rate. So like targets of opportunity. I mean, that's one of the biggest things about Africa, right? Is they say that there's just, if you want to shoot stuff, there's lots of stuff to shoot in Africa. But hunts like that, where I don't want to say that it's like canned hunts, but I mean, what comes to mind is like, I think this year you killed 500 bears in Alaska or something. Like, like, you know what I mean? Like, if somebody just said, hey, I want to do something, adventurous outside of the box. I've killed some stuff, but I want to see animals.
Yeah. Well, in that case, Texas is probably what I would start with, because Texas is pretty target rich, and you can experience different animals. And you can do it if you go with the right. That's the other thing. You got to watch what you're doing as far as booking hunts, because there's a lot of shysters. You want to go somewhere that someone else has gone, and don't ask me, because honestly, I don't have a lot of, well, I'd send you to my buddy Gary. He's got a lot of different places in Texas, but I don't have like a place in Texas that I go every year. I just say Texas because, I mean, if you're like, man, I want to spot and stock animals, you need to find somebody that is, has that. Or if you just want to, shoot animals out of a tree, or you can tailor make that to the way you want to do it. The other option is like go to Canada and hunt bears, because baited bear hunts get a huge bad rap. Like the first time I went on a baited bear hunt, I went to Idaho and I sat 6 days and never laid eyes on a fucking bear. I sat 8 hours a day, never saw a bear, never saw a single bear. I always joke. So there was like 6 or 7 guys in camp, and it was a base camp, and then we all took mules and horses. It was cool. Went up in the mountains, wall tents. So everybody was in completely different areas. I was the only person. No, excuse me. There was 2 people that didn't see bears. One guy fucking shot me because he was fucking blind, and literally blind. A blind guy was in camp. It's like one of those fucking hunts for the disabled or whatever. So I was the only one that sat on a bear bait and never shot. It took me 3 trips to kill a bear over bait with a bow. So I'm not saying but I would recommend going to Canada, and I would recommend finding an outfitter, pay a little extra to find an outfitter that that has a good reputation and where you're going to see bears every night. And it will be enjoyable. It's not an early hunt. It's not a super expensive hunt. The experience will be awesome because I think everybody should bear hunt once. If it's something you go and do and you're like, well, that was fucking easy, I didn't even enjoy that. Well, that's fine. Don't do it again. I think that's great. But if you go and you sit and you get to see bears, if you go and you sit and you're 20 yards from a black bear and your heart isn't racing, then I don't know what the fuck's wrong with it. But I've shot I shot 5 bears in Alaska this year. Every single one of them. I mean, they were really close. Like a couple of them, I was on the ground, like 10 yards, 8 yards from them. And my heart was pounding so fucking hard. I still had to make myself make a good shot. Like that wasn't, I mean, and you would say, well, God, I could, from 8 yards, I can even shoot, even if I didn't practice with a stick bow. You can fuck up with a stick bow at 8 yards. I promise you, done. So that would be my 2 suggestions. Is if you don't want to cross the border, go to Texas. And if you're more in the, I want to learn how to spot and stock, I want a lot of opportunities. But just know that when you go with an outfitter, you go to Texas, there's going to be 99% of the time, there's going to be you wound it, you bought. And if you, not saying you're going to wound stuff, but I'm just saying animals move, you make bad shots, things happen, especially when you're spot and stalking. So if you're a little less experienced, but if your goal is to learn how to stalk, I would still do the stalking, but I would say, hey, can we stalk, cheaper animals, or do you have any that are like coals, that you want to get rid of, or females? Do that. But those are the 2 hunts that I would recommend to start out with. And then from there, whatever, just ask me and give me some parameters. I'll help you out, I guess.
So I wanted to ask you, we've got a guy, one of our Patreons, he's doing his first Canadian moose hunt, and he's trying to figure out like arrow setup, broadhead, all that stuff. Whitetail guy, I think he's killed some elk with like a muzzleloader or something. But this is like this is that next step, right? And you're all the things you just said, you wound it, that's your hunt, everything's done. So what have you hunted moose, and like, how do you switch up your broadheads setups, like depending on species, or like, what's your thought process as far as equipment goes and arrows?
So I don't switch anything ever. The only time I've ever switched my setup is for Cape buffalo when I went to Africa. I shoot rabbits all the way up to moose with the same trad bow. And I'll tell you what my setup is. And if this guy wants to tell me what his setup is, I'd tell him yay or nay. The main thing is, I'm assuming he's a compound guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So the main thing is, as long as you're shooting, I mean, if you're shooting, I guarantee he's shooting a 60, 70 pound bow. I mean, I don't know too many compound guys that are shooting less. If you're shooting less, you're still fine. The only thing I would say is, in my opinion, I know people, my buddy Garrett, he shot a moose when we were there with a fairly light arrow and a expandable. I wouldn't do that. I would use, 500, 550 grains plus, on my arrow. And I would use, a cut on contact 3-blade or 2-blade and make sure it's 2. And if you have that, you're solid. Like my setup for everything it's always been about 50 to 54 pounds in a recurve bow. My arrows are around 580 to 600 grains. I'm shooting a day 6, 200 grain broadhead. I've got 250 grain full, up front, 250 grains up front. I wouldn't stress about the front of center, the bullshit. My biggest suggestion is shoot a decently heavy arrow, not crazy. Like, don't be one of these guys. I'm going to shoot an 800 grain arrow out of a 80 pound bow. I mean, I guess if you do that, you'll shoot through the moose and the moose behind it and then the tree, and you'll have to leave it there. But like, I shot a Canadian moose, which they're a pain in the ass, I'll be honest with you. I shot my Canadian moose after 4 trips 2 years ago. Shot it was quartering to me, shot it through the scapula, buried the fucking arrow in it. I mean, there was just it's on video. There's just a little bit of fletching sticking out. It ran about 30 yards and fell over on video. And that was with the bow I'm shooting right now, which it was probably my draw. I was probably drawing about 52, somewhere between 52 and 54 pounds, probably, with a 585 grain arrow I don't know if people know what a day 6 broadhead looks like, but the Evo XL is the one I shoot, which is the little bit wider one. I think I should know this, like inch and 5/8 maybe, with a little tiny bleeder on it. And I shoot everything with that. Even with a compound, I think you're shooting yourself in the foot by not being 100% familiar with your equipment. Like, especially with a stick bow, that arc of that arrow is everything. And when I have, even when I messed with my heavier bow I had basically the same speed, everything. I don't like a faster arrow. Same with compound. When I shoot a compound, I like to know like what my arrow is going to do, if it's going to miss some brush. I kind of have that. It's not like I think about that, but the more you shoot one particular thing, it's just automatic. It's going to happen. So I don't like switching my gear up. I think, but saying that with the caveat of, if you're hunting whitetails with a fucking 385 grain arrow and a expandable, I wouldn't use that. But get a decently heavy arrow and tune it. I think a lot of people think that front of center is what actually gives you penetration. That is not it. It is 100%. An arrow flying straight is going to go into an animal better than an arrow I'm not saying the front of center thing doesn't help, but if your arrow's not flying straight, it's not going to work. And a super light spine or a super light arrow with a heavy up front is a brittle arrow. I used to shoot those Black Eagle, not the deep impacts, like the whatever they were. they were really like a 300 spine was like 9 grains per inch or something, or 8 grains per inch. I mean, you look at them wrong and they'd snap in half, you know? So I think a kind of a fully weighted arrow. And if he's shooting anything over 500 grains, I think he's 1000% fine. My opinion.
Yeah. So what you're saying there, kind of like, obviously you're a more, I would say, you hunt more with the stick bow. You shoot that probably more than your compound, and all that stuff sounds like all the Ashby stuff, you know, and common sense, really, like sharp broadhead, flying straight, you know, that sort of stuff. So along that lines, I wanted to talk to you too about like going back and forth between the compound and the stick bow, more so from like from the traditional archery community, because, you know, I've got 2 or 3 buddies now that are like kind of dabbling with the traditional equipment, like going back and forth. But it's like, it's kind of like you said about the public land guide, high fence, like whatever, like it's got to be, you can only be one way. And there is some of that with like, you have to shoot the traditional bow a lot more than the compound kind of, all your stuff hasn't changed, line up all these things, shoot it, you know. And so from like the traditional community, like how do you like intertwine with them? Because if you've killed 19 of these 29 animals in a Super 10, like you have to at least have some sort of like street cred. But then at the same time, if you're not wearing a wool Asbel anorak and, you know, chewing up your own string, like you're not fully trad.
I'll be honest, I don't think the trad community really likes me that much, and I don't really give a shit. And what I mean by that is we're going to try to go to the conference thing. Like I still try to support traditional archery. But I don't identify, not to be like woke, you know, like if I had to identify it, I'd probably, if someone said you have to identify something, I'd probably tell them I'm a crossbow hunter. Like literally just because I'm so tired of, and it is like you were saying, like the trad community is probably one of the worst. It's gotten better with the newer guys, but like, you know, the old crusties. But I mean, to be honest, like the compound guys are just as bad. You know, if you, you know, fuck, God forbid you fucking shoot a crossbow. I mean, you know, you want, you know, whatever. Like, I get the argument, but can you just fucking worry about what you're doing? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, so the trad guys, I mean, there's a lot of them that I respect. There's a lot of them that people don't even know that, I think they should have a lot more street cred than me by far, by a million fucking miles. I guess I used to let all that stuff, like I said, there was a point in my life where I thought like hunting was going to be my career, it was going to be my life. And then I realized that that's 2 different things. Hunting can be your life, but you don't have to rely on it for your career. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, fuck, you know, like I don't have to, it's just great. Like I can hunt whatever I want, whenever I want. I can hunt more than these people. I don't have to abide by their rules. I don't have to, like you said, wear a fucking flannel shirt. Like I don't have to do that. Like, to be honest, I hung with a stick bow because, and maybe it's because I've done it for so long, but it's the way I prefer to hunt. I think it's, in a lot of situations, I would rather have my stick bow in my hand, because I just have figured out how to get close. And when I'm close, that's where I like to be. I like to be, you know, really close to an animal. I like to see, you know, I like to be able to see him breathing and stuff. I like that. That's the part that gets me really adrenaline pumped. And when I say close, a compound guy's idea of close might be 40 yards. My idea of close is 15 yards. So there's just two different aspects of it. But when you're that close, when you're 15 yards, give me my stick bow all day long. Like I can shoot almost from my belly. I can do, whatever. So I use a stick bow because I think it's advantageous. And I've heard a lot of like killers, like I read it in this Paul Schaefer book, he said the same things like, and Fred Eichler said it many times. I think a stick bow in my hands is deadlier than a compound in a lot of cases. Now, when you get to 60 yards, no, that's not the case. But where I like to be is really close. So the stick bow is my weapon of choice. So I guess some people choose the stick bow because they think it gives them like you said, like it gives them like this bragging rights. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as the weapon that gives me the experience that I want. And I look at it as, I've done it for so long that way that it's actually the way I I don't know how many times I've been hunting with a compound and ended up at 20 yards and like, shit, I'm too close. Like this is going to be hard to get drawn and get on this animal without him busting out of here. So I guess the trad stuff, like it's so ridiculous to me that traditional archery has, I don't know. Like I shoot a non-traditional bow. Like my bow, there isn't a lick of wood in my bow because I've had many wood risers cracked. Almost all my wood risers that I've had over the years have cracked on me. So my riser is my Carta. It's phenolic. It's a heavy mass riser. Bob Lee bows is who I use. My limbs are all carbon with freaking, I don't know what's in them, whatever, foam cores. My arrows are all the highest end carbon you could buy, super expensive, broadheads, same way. Like I shoot an elevated rest. I shoot veins, and it's funny. I was just, the books, you got to read books. So I'm reading the Paul Schaefer book, which is a phenomenal book. It's actually my second time through it, but somebody was asking him, he was hunting with somebody, and you may have read this book, but somebody was hunting with him. He's like, Paul, why do you shoot, veins and elevated rest? I shoot, I think the guy shot a recurve, but he shot wooden arrows that he made and all this stuff. And you get some shit from the traditional community for that. He's, he went into this spiel, and I'm going to butcher it, but basically it was like, well, what is traditional? Because we've had, crossbows since the medieval times, and Fred Bear was the most innovative human being on the planet back when, he is the king of traditional bow hunting, but he was coming up with all sorts of new things, and part of why there's a compound bow. And, we like to be traditional. What do you have to do? You know what I'm saying? Like it's hard to know what that means. So I try to stay the fuck out of that. I just try to, I think we're all just hunters, and that's the main thing we should focus on. We're all hunters, and you should hunt the way that you enjoy. So I guess, maybe that's why the traditional guys don't like me. And I voiced my opinion somewhat on the compound, and there's a lot of traditional guys that fucking hate compounds. They think it's the reason we've lost all of our and the compound guys blame the crossbow guys. Crossbow guys blame the rifle guys. I don't know. It's there's definitely got to be some consideration when dealing with that, but that's not for us to decide. That's for the game. That's for the people that fucking make those decisions. We should just all, not to kumbaya, but we should all just get along. You know what I mean? Like, fuck, why do we have to say I'm a trad guy? Oh, I'm a I'm a bow hunter. I'm a whatever. Like, just fuck it. I don't know. You said you went to Kalamazoo. What did you think when you were? Because you were a compound guy, right?
I would say I still am. I mean, like,
right, but
yeah,
when you went there, were you just getting into traditional archery?
yeah.
Okay. What was your experience there? I'm sure it was a good one, but I'm just curious what your thoughts were.
So I have like a different, like, so my background, like my father-in-law, like met Fred Bear. Like he worked at our local archery shop. He was there when they switched from recurves to, so he's, you know, been doing this whole thing. Like when you posted that like lovely room of death, that was like when I walked into like my future wife's house, so the traditional stuff, like I had heard all these stories and whatever, and the guy that I was telling you about that we went and stayed with elk hunting, like has killed everything under the sun, and he's another one of these guys that you're talking about where nobody knows who they are, but he's killed, brown bears and moose and everything with a stick bow. And so those are kind of like the guys that are in my life. Our club is really old, and it's like one of the oldest archery clubs like in the nation. And there's still these 100-year-old guys that meet there every day for coffee. They call them the coffee club, and they got their stick bows. And so I see these older guys. So walking into Kalamazoo, like I kind of had like an idea of like what to expect. And like, you're younger than me. So, like I brought my daughter the one time she was like 7 or 8. And I said, even with her and all the kids that were running around, the average age in the building was probably 59. So I knew like for a fact that this was going to be a bunch of old dudes. And then you have like that other side of it that like, I don't know what you'd call them, like a tradfluencer, like the guys with their new flannels and the Filson and all this stuff tucked in, and they're skipping around there all happy, and like, it's like, so I'm 100% like in the middle of all of that. But it's hard. One of my buddies just went to the one this year, and he was looking at all these bows, and it's like, the bow that you shoot, $2,500. Like we don't blink an eye at a Carbon RX1 that's $2,000, not set up, no sight, no anything, but like for just this stick and this string or like whatever. And the bobblies are different with their 4 bolts instead of 2 and all this other stuff. It's like, oh, that costs that much. And so that I think is like the biggest like shock to me. But I feel like that show, there's like a lot of flannel, a lot of the same stuff. And I feel the one thing I do like about that, and it's probably like maybe like what you're talking about, like where you're at odds, is it is like a real community. Like all those dudes know each other. It seems like everybody in there is, I feel like there's at least amongst them, or at least from like the outside looking in, there's a lot less animosity than there is like in the compound world, or, I don't know. I feel like they're like, we got this thing, we're going to cling to it until the last of us is dead, like type thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I think some of that's like a kind of like a badge of honor. I think some people look at traditional archery as kind of like an excuse or like an identity, and little less of like because they enjoy it. Like I think they do enjoy it, but I mean, how many? I this is why my mouth gets me in trouble, because I just say shit. But a lot of trad guys, I've literally had this multiple times. I've had guys message me and be like, did you see this shit about, these guys and they're shooting, compounds and blah, 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 and they're ruining this, and they're really bitching about technology. They're really bitching about it. And I'm like, okay, this is a hardcore trad guy. So I look at their page, and I don't mean this to be offensive, but they've killed, like this year they shot a doe with their recurve and a buck with a gun, and a lot of their page is like gun kills, and that's fine. That's fine. I don't mind that. But why are you bitching about the guy shooting something with a compound? I don't really follow why you're even bitching about it. So I guess the like the old guys you were just talking about, do they, I mean, that's pretty common for these old guys to really be pretty hard on compound guys, but how do they really feel about it? Like if you actually have a conversation about what do they say? Are they completely against it, or are they kind of just like,
No, like I feel like it's like all like somewhat in jest, but they're always like they're very, very inviting. They're like saying you should come, like, because like now I, because of like my work schedule, I'm not shooting on our I shoot on our league when I can, but I have to work on that day. But they have these old dudes. They've got a league on Sundays that's just tradbo. So I went and shot that a couple times now, and all the guys are like, hey, we shoot trad at this club on Fridays and this club on Tuesdays. Like, you should definitely come and do it. And then, to tell some of those guys that I'd shot with a couple, over the years, and told them like, hey, I'm learning, and to say that I shot my first deer, a couple deer, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Like, are you going to stick with it? And I think that's like where that's really a fine line, because it's like, do I want to like take on that role and responsibility of like identifying as a trad guy? Like, I'm going to be a trad guy now. That's the weirdest like decision. Like, I feel like exactly the way that you do, in the sense of like, I have a lot more fun shooting the trad bow. I shoot really fast anyways with a compound. Like, they always make fun of me. Like, it's just the way that it is. And so shooting instinctive with a trad bow for me is like very natural and a lot more fun. And, with a compound, you're shooting these deer anyways. How many deer for us have like walked up to the base of your tree, or how many deer have you killed where you're like, I could have killed them with a slingshot or like a rock? Like, they've been that close. So it's like, why not try it? And I wanted to do it because it was like more difficult. Like, it was like something that I thought would be more difficult. And to be honest with you, I had a lot of fun with it this year, but like, this is horrible, but it's like, you kind of alluded to it like before, like it wasn't like when you were talking about the different hunts, but it was like not all that I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be really hard. And like the first time I took it out this year, I killed a buck. I shot 3 times. I ran out of broadheads, but the last one connected and I killed my first buck with a trad bow. And it was like somewhat anticlimactic, because I was like, it's supposed to be in my head, it was going to be like this very like romantic, like, oh my gosh, like, but I mean, they were far enough away that I had enough time to like really think about it, make a good shot, and the deer ducked. And then it was just so quiet or whatever that the other one didn't run away. And so then I ended up killing him. Like, it was just weird. Like, you're not supposed to get 3 shots at the same deer,
right? Well, and that's something people like different aspects. Like you pick up the recurve, and almost everybody I've ever talked to thinks, shooting a recurve is just fun. It's enjoyable. Like, it is fun, and it's kind of like, I mean, the compound, there's lots of things that you need to do, and it is fun to shoot a compound. And if you can get some long distance, that gives you some challenge. But the recurve makes every shot a challenge that you really have to focus on. So it makes it kind of like a game. So, but I think people get lost a little bit in like, oh, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it. I have to get rid of my compound. I have to be a trad guy. And then also, like what you were just saying, you go out and you have some success. You may go out next year, and it depends on where you're hunting. If you're hunting in a tree stand and there's the challenge of that is going to be the shot. It's going to be the shot. Unless, I mean, if you're talking specifically bow or specifically trad bow hunting, because it's all, everything you're doing is exactly the same. Everything's the exact same for the most part with whitetail, because most of your whitetail hunting is done pretty compound. You're shooting them fairly close. Usually, I'm not saying always, but usually you're you're not setting up your tree stand so you get an 80-yard freaking shot. I mean, you're setting it up so you get a 20, 30-yard shot. So your shot is going to make the experience the challenge. And you had a good experience, but you could have shot that thing in the ass and then had to, I've had plenty of guys be like, man, I wounded one, then I couldn't find it, then I wounded another one. I'm like, dude, it's part of it. It's learning. I mean, you got to learn to deal with the shit shows with traditional archery. So I guess I always tell people, for one, if you're coming into this with the aspect of, I'm going to be a trad guy and that's all I'm going to do, and that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. But I don't recommend. I really think you should come in, you should try it, and you should enjoy it. Shoot a doe, you should shoot whatever, you should work your way up, but don't give up the other kind of hunting that you do and enjoy. And there's no reason for that. And what you were saying about, like, the biggest thing is, it is fucking hilarious to me when compound guys, and I'm a compound guy too, but when guys are like, $2,500 for a bow, and I'm like, bro, how much did your sight cost? $500? I'm like, your sight, the fucking, this little thing that some fucking machine built is $500. But this fucking bow that somebody actually put their hands on and built, the majority of, can't be $2,500. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm not saying you need to buy a $2,500 bow either, but yeah, I mean, it's hilarious. Like, it's you've got to look at it differently when you go into it. You gotta look at one, what you want out of it. If you're gonna go into it and you're like, man, I'm gonna really learn this, and I'm going to eventually hunt with this thing. If that's your attitude, do not sell your compound. I don't think, if you can afford both, I think you should keep it. But I also think if you're that guy that thinks, man, I think this is pretty sure this is where I want to be. I've shot a stick bow. I love it. I want to be this someday. Build up to it. Buy a good bow. If you're like, I just want to try it, buy a cheap piece of shit. But if you like it, that thing is just going to be garbage. It's just going to be like $100 to $200 that you spend on just an experience. You're not going to get anything back for it. Whatever. It could be your bow fishing rig, whatever. But yeah, definitely. I find it hilarious when people are like, that's really expensive for a bow. I'm like, what did your bow cost? Well, yeah, I mean, I probably got $3,000 in it. And I'm like, but it's a compound, man. It's got all this stuff. And I'm like, I get it. But I mean, fucking stabilizers now are like $200 for this little stick. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, it's, I don't, I just got to look at it differently. But yeah, you don't need a $2,000 bow. But if it is where you want to be, I think you get the $2,000 bow, you learn on the $2,000 bow. And then you stay with the $2,000 bow. You don't switch and buy this bow, that bow, this bow, because there are a few good ones out there. There's like the best, and I've shot a lot of different bows, but a lot of guys, what will happen is they shoot something, they get used to it, they shoot something different, and it's like, well, that feels fucking terrible. Well, that's because that one's smooth, and the one you're used to is not. You know what I'm saying? So there is something to the fact of buying something that's, if that's the way you want to go, I guess. I don't know. But
yeah, it's strange because, we live in a world where, like, success is everything. Like, we want it now. We want it easy. We want to, we want to binge watch TV. We want to, we'll have our food delivered, or we'll have our groceries delivered. We want everything immediately, Amazon tomorrow. And, these custom bows, a lot of them are being built for you. You get on a waiting list or you get what they have available. And then you go and you have to practice, and you have to, it's not the crossbow where you just pull it out and, it's probably still on. We don't need to shoot it again. That sort of thing. And I think that's where the whole, the success thing is what everybody's afraid of. And I think that learning curve you're talking about is like, you're right. I didn't like shoot these deer in the ass or anything like that. But I mean, I shot 9 times at deer with the stick this year, and I hit 2 of them, and I put, I think, 1 blade of a broadhead across the nose of this one buck. But that other than that, there were a lot of them, and I had them on video that they ducked, and I'm like, man, I'm glad. Like the last one that I missed, I'm like, I'm glad she ducked that, because it would have went right through the guts, and it would have been a really long night, and it would have been a problem. And so I was very fortunate in that. But I also have talked to enough of those old dudes and enough of my buddies who have grown up with the stick bow and all that stuff, where they're like, some of that era of guys, and my father-in-law included, is like, sometimes you just got to get an arrow in them, and we'll figure it out later, and that's kind of where minute of animal sometimes. So
yeah, it's, I mean, you got to be ethical, but sometimes everybody's line is a little different on ethics as far as like moral ethics. You know what I mean? Like, and when you're first starting out, wing and arrows is not what you want to do, nor is it what you want to do when you've shot a ton of animals. But there are certain times where I've taken shots that I can't even believe I took. Like, I was like, and in the moment, it just seemed like, fuck, I'm gonna drill this thing. Like, I don't even I think that's what I love so much about hunting with a recurve, is every situation is different. Dude, I've passed shots at 20 yards. I have passed shots at broadside animals at 20 yards because I just didn't feel right. I don't know if I was in my head too much or what happened, early on. And I've shot some shit longer than I probably would ever say that I have shot at it. And I mean, I would tell people, I'm not going to lie to you, but it just depends on the day. And like, that's what I love about it. It's such a challenge, and it makes everything a challenge. Like when I went brown bear hunting, I hunted brown bears over bait. And at that time, that was the most expensive. That was the most money I'd ever spent on a hunt. And it was very mentally challenging knowing that if I fucked that shot up, there's a pretty good chance we're not going to find that bear, because bears they don't bleed. They don't, even if you kill them, sometimes they go a ways, and they're hard to find in that brush and that thick and that wet. And so it was very mentally challenging knowing that I needed to make a really good shot with a stick bow, which is honestly what will make you make a bad shot. The more you think about it, at least for me, the more I think about it, the worse I shoot. So I had, I just love it because it is what you want to make, and like you were saying, you missed some, you shot some. And those old timers, I guarantee you, if you talk to them long enough, they tell you some shit shows. I'll tell you some shit shows. Like, you're gonna have them. You hunt plenty. I mean, I've had, more often than not, I make a good shot, and the animal goes over there and dies. And then but you're gonna have that. I mean, you're gonna have that in every time. You're gonna have it in rifle hunting. I mean, how many legs get blown off of animals? The only thing is you can reach out there and finish them faster, same with compounds. There's always some of that going on. That's the kind of stuff I'm telling you that you can't post everything. You got to be but you also got to be telling people like, hey, this shit happens. Because I think a lot of people come into traditional archery or even just archery and they have a bad experience and they think it's just them, So we do need to somewhat talk about it in formats like this. We do need to kind of say, like, shit happens. It happens to all of us. It happens to all the big guys. It happens here and there. But I don't know. Some guys let that really deter them from hunting. Honestly, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen people say, "Well, I was a stick bow for a year, man, and I wounded 3 deer, and I just can't deal with it. I can't do it." I'm like, hey, if that bothers you that much, good for you. That, I mean, I don't it sucks, man. I've wounded animals. I've wounded them with every possible weapon you could wound them with. But you got to tell yourself, like, did you wound it because you did something you shouldn't have done? Or did you wound it because you did everything maybe you fucked up, but in the moment you weren't just like, well, I'm just going to send an arrow and hope shit happens. Did you actually, feel good about it? If you did the things you should have done and it happened, you got to let yourself deal. You got to be okay with it. You got to learn to accept that. And if you can't, then shoot a rifle. I think that's what Steve Ranella did. I think I've heard him say he doesn't bow hunt anymore because he just couldn't fucking deal with the, wounding shit. And he liked the fact that, it was more lethal, and that's great. Fine. I think there should be rifle hunters in the world,
So from that like aspect, for a guy like yourself who has, killed, probably more animals than most guys, and especially guys that are starting out or whatever, do you have a way that obviously you just kind of went through like your process of saying, like, did I do something wrong, of like bouncing back from like wounding an animal or missing or something? Because I feel like right at the beginning of the year, like for myself, sometimes you feel like you press so hard because you're like, I might not get another opportunity. And then as soon as you like mess up that opportunity, then you're like, I don't want to mess up again, and I can imagine on some of these hunts, like you had outlined with the brown bear, like the cost of that hunt weighs in there just as much, saying like, oh my God. So how do you deal with like that, like mental, like I said, the best way that I can say it is like pressing or like putting too much pressure on yourself?
Right. It's hard, man. Everybody deals with it. It goes back to experience. I would say a lot of life really is mental. Like everything hard is just one mental battle after another. Really, the mental aspect of bow hunting and hunting in general is way harder than the physical. Everybody's like, I've seen and heard about, I've got a ton of dudes, they're sheep guides, and almost every one of them has told me numerous stories of some jack dude that just looked like a fucking Greek god, 25 years old. And he buckled on a sheep hunt after a day and a half, couldn't hack it. Guy had to get out of here, made every excuse in the book, had to get away, couldn't do it. And then there's always that guy that's a little overweight and, whatever, but, and he crushed it for 12 days. So hunting is so mental. And then you bring in the aspect of shooting, and shooting is very mental. It fucks with all of us. Like I right now am dealing with a little bit of trouble. At the end of the year, you're this or that or whatever has happened. You start wanting to be better for the next year. You want to train yourself. And with a stick bow, for me, I do better I do better on animals, probably because I'm not thinking about it. Like I kind of, and I don't want to use the word autopilot because I am thinking things. Like I am paying attention to what the animal's doing, and I'm not like a hair picker. Like I don't pick a tiny little hair behind the shoulder. My goal is to watch that arrow disappear behind the shoulder. So I'm always saying focus on behind the shoulder. Like I'm going to watch that arrow enter right where I know it needs to end. I'm going to fucking, that's, if I'm focusing on that and I'm not focusing on my back tension and all right, pull. If I start doing that bullshit, my fucking arrow's going sailing over that thing 100%. But right now I'm dealing with, going through the year and wanting to make this year better. So I just recently put a clicker back on my bow, which is, my wife she doesn't call this clicker season. I do. Because every time this time of year, I'm like, I've got to figure my shit out. Because I'm short drawing, I'm doing whatever. What I'm trying to do with that clicker right now is mostly just train my body to get to full draw. Like I'm not even really using it the correct way. So I guess I'm going to get to your original question, but what I'm saying is every single person fucking deals with this shit. We all deal with target panic. We all deal with missing animals, wounding animals, dealing with that. The more you deal with it, the more animals you kill. Like I said, goes back to experience. Go shoot as many animals as you can. If your state gives out doe tags, shoot as many of them as you can. Donate the meat. Do whatever. Like the more you do, the more blood trails you're on. The more times you fuck up, the more you learn, and that will help you with dealing with this mental thing, knowing that when you have a bad day of shooting, whether it be at an animal or at a target, like there's days like last night I shot like fuck, my son was making fun of me. Like my son's like, Dad, I'm a better shot than you. Like seriously, he's ragging on me. I'm like, little bastard. So, but I got to be like, all right. And it was bothering me. It bothers me. It's not like I'm just like, oh, I've shot a bunch of animals. I'm fine. But that's what you got to do. You just got to get over it and then try to fix it. But I say that also to say, don't fix it if it ain't broke. And that's my biggest problem. Like I try to fix stuff that isn't broken. I'm always like, oh, well, I've got to make decisions. Like Joel Turner says, I've got to, go through this shot process and I got to figure that out. And I'm like, oh, that sounds fucking great. But when I do that, I don't even look at where I'm fucking shooting. And so the way my brain works the best is I have to look at what I want to hit. I have to get to fucking full draw because that's the main thing. And I got to focus on not focusing on getting to full draw. That's got to happen for me. That's just got to happen. And so I was getting a little weak on that. So now I'm using the clicker. So that becomes a little bit second nature. Then when I take the clicker off, once I get, used to it, and then it just becomes second nature, then I take that shit off or I pull it so it's too long and I can't get to it. And I just like, I'm there and that's all second nature. Then I'm focusing on what I'm going to do. And then it all works. So what you were saying about so how do I get over that shit? I don't any easier than anybody else. Like everybody struggles with this shit. I just have to look at, okay, my experience, I know I can get over it. The guy that's coming up and just starting out, he doesn't know that. And he sees, this Band-Aid or that Band-Aid or whatever. I'm not saying don't get coaching. I'm not advising don't get coaching. I think it's great. I don't think it works for a guy like me that's been doing this shit the wrong way for so long that coaching, all it does is fuck you up in the head. You've got two struggling things telling you different ways. I like Joel Turner. We talk a fair bit. I've never met him, but we talk, and he would fucking hate me saying this shit. But I think if I do the coaching stuff, and I've tried Tom Plum, same thing, great coach. I wish that I was starting out and I would get coaching from both of them, and that's how I would learn, and then that would be my process. But what I've learned is in the moment, humans are going to revert back to the thing that's comfortable. And if you have a struggling dynamic there, the thing that is comfortable is fighting with the thing that you think you should be doing, and then you really fuck it up. So you just got to be less hard on yourself. I tell my wife that all the time. Like, we got to be less hard on ourselves for being bad parents. Like we yell at our kids today. Fuck it. Everybody does. You just have to learn to be okay with it. Like, everybody fucks up. Like, nobody wants to show it. I don't want to show it. Nobody wants to show it, but everybody does. Tom, I've shot with Tom where Tom was so frustrated at himself he wanted to break his bow over his leg. Of course, he's the nicest human on earth. He'd never do that, but everybody struggles. So if you just tell yourself, like, man, today was a bad day, tomorrow will be a better day. But if if you're dwelling on yesterday and you're trying to fix it, that day is going to be just as bad. So that's my best advice in a giant wagon wheel that I always like to do, is just forgive yourself for yesterday and do what you know you need to do. Now, if you have an issue, like what I have right now, like I'm trying to fix it with the clicker. I know I was short drawn. I know I was collapsing a little bit. Hey, I shoot with a clicker for a month or so, and that full draw becomes, right now, hell, I'm drawing to the click, and then I'm actually collapsing a little bit, and then drawing back to, if I, like, I'm not really using it the way that most people do. Like, my form is a little bit off anyway. So if I draw to the clicker, I'm like, all right, well, now I've hit it. And then I reset it, and then I pull through it or pull towards it. As long as I'm getting close, that's helping me know, my body knows where that fucking, where I need to be. Because your body it'll get into autopilot where you're, getting target panicky and you want to fucking punch that trigger, let that arrow go, fling that arrow. So if there is a problem, address it, but don't make a problem where there's not a problem. It's good advice, but it's crazy hard to do. I do it all the time. I'm always fucking with my stuff.
Yeah, I can really relate to that as far as like, because it's like the adage of like, if you never heard of target panic, like you don't have target panic, and then as soon as you learn like what it is, you're like, oh my god, like now I've got it. Same thing, like when I shoot a compound, like last week, everything was good for like the first 10 shots, and then I was like, man, I'm really shooting good, and then everything went out the window, and then it was like, don't make a bad shot, and it spirals out of control. And what I need to do, like with the compound, is I need to just pull like against I shoot a bow with limb stops, and I just have to pull the limbs off the bow, and then I'm focusing on something else, and then I can shoot better. But and that with the
what you need to do, like you're aware, and that's what people need to focus on, is like what you just said, like what you need to do, so the next day you do that one thing. It's not a bunch of new things. Don't invent a bunch of new shit that you think is going to fix the problem. Do the things you do know, and if you can't figure it out, then get somebody to help you. I think what you just said is awesome. I think that's don't make it more complicated than it has to be. You know what that one thing is that makes you shoot better. Do that.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Like, what hunts do you have coming up?
Well, in the immediate future, I've got, I'm going on a muskox hunt here in April. So that's my, that's kind of what I'm preparing for right now, preparing to, shooting in my bulky, Michelin shoot suit, and trying to learn that. It's kind of crazy. Just my, you wouldn't think it would throw off your form and things as much as it does, but big gloves and everything is crazy. So I'm kind of dealing with that. And then, it's tag season. So I'm sending in for different units and different things, trying to figure out what fall looks like. But, yeah, muskox is the next thing. Of course, turkeys as well. And, I might get out and maybe do some bear hunting if I can, but, trying really hard. I shouldn't say this. Well, I've said it out loud already, so I'll say it here too. I'm trying really hard to budget my money better and not spend my money on like right now, I'm trying to, like, I have some goals that I want to reach, and I'm trying to put the money towards that. And then and what I mean by that is, I'm not going to pay somebody to hunt for pub or for private access in Nebraska. I'm just going to hunt, if I can get on somebody, or if I can do some work and trade some hunting, I'm going to do that kind of stuff this year. Um, our public land is still pretty beat up by, it's getting a little better now that they've limited tags, but it's still pretty beat up. That's why but that's kind of my goal, is to put the money towards the goals and still hunt these other areas, whether it be private land that I can get on, or or public land or whatever. So that's kind of where I'm at this year. It's just all the animals I have left are pretty expensive. So
Whenever I think of muskox hunting, and like now, since the guy killed the one on a loan, that's a little bit different. That's at least in my mind. But I just see like Tom Miranda wandering around in that big white suit amongst these like creatures. And then I always immediately, and I'm not like a nerd, so I can't tell you like which movie or specifically, but I think of like a scene from like the old Star Wars movies where they're like in their like white suits and there's all that snow and shit. Like that's what I think of like muskox. And I think I've heard you talk about it where it's like not like necessarily like a difficult animal to kill, but like to get there and to do all the stuff. And I mean, obviously you got to shoot in that. That's just one of the things that's like never ever, like even seeing like Tom Miranda do it was like, man, I need to go kill a muskox. Like I don't know, man.
It's not a species, like I said, like it's not something you would really go after unless you're going after the 29. And I mean, I'm not saying that because I probably would, because like you said, I've always thought they were like prehistoric. They look like a freaking, yeah, they literally look like a prehistoric animal. I mean, the animal itself is very cool. And again, it goes right back to what I was saying about the experience. Sometimes the hunt, the actual killing of the animal, is not the experience that you're getting. It's like sometimes the killing of the animal is like calling in a bull elk and him screaming in your face. That's what you're looking for. With a muskox or even like a mountain lion, mountain lion hunting, shooting the animal once it's in the tree, really still with a stick bow, can be complicated and difficult. I'm not saying that part isn't there, but the animal killing is maybe not necessarily what you go on that hunt for. You go on it, and to be honest, it's probably one of the potentially most dangerous hunts a guy can do. And I've got quite a few buddies that have done it, and not one of them. I mean, they don't talk fondly of it. They say, I had my buddy that owns the archery shop. He's like, dude, I wouldn't wish that shit on my worst enemy. He damn near died. He got like a lung infection while he was up there. He spent like 3 weeks in the hospital when he got back. Just because of the severe cold, and he already kind of had an infection. Then it got worse because he was up there. There's no one around. You're dealing with Inuit guides that barely speak English. They're used to the cold. I've heard of guys taking their gloves off and leaving them and damn near getting frostbite or losing hands. Like the complication to that hunt is not necessarily like the animals. They're just surviving out there, and you might be able to just walk up to them. I've also heard that after they get hunted a bit, they do get a little cagey, and got to get a little western sometimes. But yeah, it just all goes back to that what do you want out of the hunt? If you just look at it like, oh man, those animals, I've seen, Tom Miranda just walked up to that one and shot it, it kind of charged him, and then it just turned and like gave him a perfect shot. Like that doesn't even seem hard. Why would you do that? Well, yeah, but it was 40 below. Like, you have to consider all of it. And that's, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. But again, it might not be an animal that anybody would ever go after. I mean, they're getting, fairly pricey. And why would you go after it unless you just either had a burning desire to have one in your house, or you're going after the 29, there's, or if you want to experience the Arctic, which is, I do, and you can't afford a polar bear, then you go hunt muskox, I guess.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, I mean, I've kept you here quite some time. Maybe we'll have to catch up again after you get back from the muskox hunt, and we'll look at your black fingers and black toes and
Absolutely
talk about that. So for you, where can people add on to that 16, 17 listeners that you got on the podcast?
Honestly, I don't know. I do it on my phone. Just a fair warning. If you want to listen to it, just know it's basically what you've heard today, the garbage spewing that I just talk about. I basically am just trying to get this garbage out of my head so I don't annoy my wife. That's all I'm doing. And I have time when I'm driving. So I think I know it's on Spotify because that's the app I use. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's not on everything, but it's Earn Your Hunt podcast. And then social media, I do most on, I'm basically just an Instagram guy. I think it's Jake _D_Downs. Again, if you get offended, if you've made it this far in the podcast, listen to me cuss. This is pretty light compared to my podcast, but you're probably not going to be offended by some of the jokes that I make. So follow along. But if you're a guy that's like, you're the devil, I'm a Christian, I'm going to save you, please don't follow me. I'm not interested. Like, I've had plenty of people try to save me. I'm going to block you. I don't want followers. I don't need followers. But yeah, if you're a cool dude, you like to hunt, you like to bullshit about hunting, I'm hit me up, I guess. I'll do what I can to.
Awesome.
Anyway.
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for the time, and I really enjoyed it. So I hope it wasn't too influencery for you.
No worries, man. Have me on it.
Friends of NRA is your chance to support our Second Amendment rights and preserve America's hunting traditions. Join Friends of NRA at one of our 600 exciting events nationwide. From games to auctions and exclusive firearms, Friends of NRA events are your chance to support a cause you care about while having a great time with patriots in your community. Whether you're a seasoned shooter, an avid hunter or outdoorsman, or passionate about freedom, there's a place for you within Friends of NRA. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you. Stand up for freedom with the Friends of NRA.
Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.